Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking with you about how the coronavirus is impacting the news of work. I'm Caroline Fairchild, editor at large at LinkedIn. How confident are you about work right now? This is a question that we wanted to answer with our new bi-weekly workforce confidence index that we launched today. Really looking at how workers in the U.S. are feeling on the ground right now about their industry, their careers, and also their personal life. LinkedIn, we have 675 million members around the world. We really have a unique way of gauging how workers are feeling, and we want to have a conversation with you about that on today's show. We're going to go through the main findings of the survey, as well as speak to Joey Miller, who's the CEO of Business Talent Group, about how freelancers and independent workers are faring right now in the coronavirus. But we can't do any of that without you, so thank you for joining us on the screen. We want to have a conversation with you on today's show about what's top of mind for you. Say hi and let us know what's happening on the ground, and we will have a conversation together on today's show. All right, let's start by unpacking the main findings of our workforce confidence index, which came out today, and we're going to do a bi-weekly moving forward. The first thing to talk about is different workers are responding differently depending on what industry that they are in. We're seeing that if you are in media or design right now, these are industries that are having a lot less confidence in, say, public administration, manufacturing, finance. I think we have a graphic that we're going to pull up right now to show us exactly how the industry is more confident. As you can see with entertainment, design, travel, they're the lowest confidence in the industry right now when it comes to job security, finances, as well as career prospects. What's interesting to me is that tech is still hiring. We know that we've done some coverage on LinkedIn and off that tech workers are seeing a lot of confidence right now. So that's one of the higher end ones. And also public administration officials are feeling really confident with their job security right now, which was an interesting finding to me. We're seeing members respond to the results of the survey already on the platform. We have a comment here from Nathan Rain, who's pointing out the distinction that this is industries specifications of how workers are feeling, but this is also a reflection of both white collar and blue collar work. He says, not shockingly, it appears the confidence in the economy is correlated with white collar versus blue collar jobs. Industries in the red have a large number of blue collar employees out of work right now. Those in the green can largely work from home and not too much an impact on the economic policy. We also took a look at how workers are feeling separately when it comes to generations. So how are millennials feeling versus boomers? And we found out that millennials are actually the most confident right now when it comes to their job security. And if you think about that, it makes sense. If you think about how, if you're a millennial right now, you have enough time in the workforce to be confident with your career, but you also have some ability to make up for some of the losses that you may be experiencing right now because of the coronavirus or later on in your career as well. I'm hearing that my audio is not coming through. So you can see where it comes in. If that's still happening, let me know, guys. We're going to roll right through it, I guess. So yes, millennials are telling us that they're the most confident. We have a comment also coming in from another member on YouTube who's telling us that millennials are kind of immune to this slowdown because they also experienced a recession earlier on in their career. So that's something that we're talking about as well. Another part of the survey that we are seeing is that many respondents are coming back on their personal spending. Hi, Susie.
Hi, Caroline. How are you this morning?
Is my audio not working?
It hasn't been working, but now it does sound like it is working to me. Maybe we can just chat right now and we can see how it's going.
Sure. So we were just talking about, I was saying that many of the respondents in this survey were cutting back on their personal spending, but there's less evidence of people paying on the debt. Overall, people are less confident when it comes to their financial situation, which isn't surprising to me when we think about job security right now in a lot of industries being hit hard by layoffs. We see the jobless claims numbers coming in and they're not great. And so this confidence is definitely being hit by the workforce. Another graphic that I wanted to pull up if we can is a distinction between how senior leaders are feeling right now as opposed to lower rank and file employees. Not surprising to me, executives are less optimistic right now in the near term. Workers appear to be more shielded than senior managers from the negative impacts of the pandemic. So I think executives who are, they're on the front lines of the P&Ls at least. And so they are seeing this dramatic impact that it's having on their industry. So they are less confident. And then another really interesting insight from the survey was how workers are thinking about their careers moving forward and where they see differences and what the workforce is going to look like once the pandemic is over. I found it interesting that 50% of the members that we surveyed told us that they believe that they're going to have more flexible working options coming out of the pandemic. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about have to do with, is this going to be a boon for flexible work? All of us are working from home. Companies are having to invest in remote technologies. Is this going to be something that we're going to see out of the pandemic with more companies allowing flexible workplace options? 1 and 2 that we surveyed said yes, which I think is a boon for me. And I think everyone feels that way as well. So I really want to get to what we're going to talk to for the majority of the conversation, which is freelancers. One of the main findings of the survey was that freelancers have had their confidence shaken in the workforce just as much as the unemployed. And so we're going to have a conversation on the show today about what independent talent should be thinking about right now. When I saw the results of the survey, I knew we had to bring on Jody Miller. She's the CEO of Business Talent Group and really has a great insight into how the independent workforce is thinking right now. Jody, if you're backstage, would love to bring you on the show. And I'm seeing a note that Jody has popped off. So I think we're just gonna roll through this and see what we can talk about in terms of the freelance workforce. I don't know if Susie wants to come on. We can talk about the first, what we're kind of seeing with freelancers and also, what's going on industry-wise.
Definitely. Thank you, Caroline. We had a show last week with our colleague, Andrew Seaman, who covers a lot of hiring and job searching kind of news. And there was a comment that came up on that show about freelancers specifically. Someone wrote into us and said, I'm a freelancer. This is my main source of business. I have a great client base, but business is a little bit spotty right now. Obviously, some companies are moving different directions. This person said she was having a hard time finding new business. Normally, she'd go out and she'd be networking, and she knows all the traditional ways of doing that. But she found that a lot of people were not looking to talk to anyone who they didn't already know. So she was coming to that particular show looking for advice on how to network in this time. All of her business comes from new contacts when half of her contacts aren't looking for work anymore. So that was someone, direct from a member who is a freelancer talking about one aspect of this struggle.
Right. Yeah. And I'm seeing that Jody is going to join us back. Jody, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I think this is just a part of the new world order right now.
Yeah, having a very hard time hearing you. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Is my audio coming through on your end?
It's fairly spotty. I heard bits and pieces, but if it's helpful, I can give a little color on what we're seeing in the independent market.
Let's do that.
If that's, I guess I would first say no one has a crystal ball, and I think we're still right in the middle of companies totally grasping what they're dealing with. So I think what we've seen in the last month may not necessarily be what we'll see in the months coming. One of the really positive things we've seen, we're a business that places high-end independent consultants in projects largely with the Fortune 1000. And the really interesting data point is that most of the projects that were in process have continued, but the vast, vast majority. And I think that's a very positive sign for independent professionals. It shows that the work they're doing is important. It's not easily dismissed. And I think that's a data point that companies should look at carefully, because one of the things that's kind of the playbook from the 20th century is when we hit hard economic times, the first thing we do is we, get rid of all the outsiders. Whether it's consultants or temporary labor. And I think as we move into a more evolved view of labor, that notion needs to be rethought. And one of the key data points, I guess, is that when individual managers are looking at an uncertain world, the projects they had going on on with independent consultants were deemed to be important. And I think that's a positive sign.
And Jody, in terms of flexible work moving forward, project-based work, shouldn't companies right now, given how we're not sure what's going to happen long term, shouldn't they be thinking more about leveraging project-based talent right now?
Gosh, I'm so sorry. I literally hear
I think
you.
we're having a hard time
And I'm not
connecting
sure
with
what
Jody
to,
right
what
now,
to,
guys.
except to say, I know we may need to regroup. The question, I'm so sorry. I'll just say one last thing about just overall. There's no question in my mind that independent workers, as we lived through the last recession, we've been a leading indicator for the economy stabilizing, and I'm very confident that one of companies opening back up, and it's a much quicker to hire an independent professional than to relaunch a permanent search. And we think that this community will do really, really well. And I'm really glad the government acknowledged this community in their programs, which was, to me, a big step forward. And I'm so sorry the audio is not good. Regroup.
Well, that was Jody Miller. Jody, I'm sorry that the audio wasn't good too, but your insights are valid, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have you back on hopefully when we can figure out this internet situation. It's just a matter of the way that we work. I'm going to bring back on my colleague and co-host, Susie Jackson. We're going to talk a little bit more about flexible work. Hi, Susie.
Hey, Caroline.
So I've interviewed Jody before, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring her on the show is that she has been saying for years that the best companies, the most competitive companies, they need to have this flexible workplace environment that allows for project-based work, that allows for working from home, and allows for independent contractors, allows for people to be their own boss and not necessarily be a rank and file employee. I think that as we move out of the pandemic, we're hopefully going to see more of that, and a lot of people are pointing to that as one of the silver linings of what's going on with the workforce right now.
Definitely. I mean, you and I are working from home right now. Just before the show started today, we were talking about what is it going to look like when we are all asked to come back to work? I mean, forget about the health implications of just the virus and its containment, but do some people go in waves? Do we all go back at once? Are people going to feel comfortable with that, even if they're cleared medically or cleared by whatever means that we decide that we're using? We're getting pretty good at working from home. This is our 6th week, I think, you and Caroline, you and I, and the whole show here. The show didn't exist 6 weeks ago, and we're on episode 21, I think. So we've really kind of found our pace a little bit. It does seem like we're still going to be doing this for quite a while, but I agree that the flexibility seems like it's really going to be a part of whatever our new normal is going forward.
And if you're just joining us on the stream, I'm Caroline Fairchild. This is Susie Jackson. We're the co-hosts of Business Unusual. It's a live show where we're talking with you through spotty internet connections about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we all work. We're talking today about freelance talent, contractors. One of the trends that we saw in this survey was they just feel really shaken up right now because of a lack of job security. But this is something that we've been hearing from independent contractors, freelancers for a while, because all of the benefits, the 401ks, the health insurance, historically, these have all been tied to working for a specific company and working there for a really long time. And we're seeing that shaken up right now. We've been seeing that being shaken up for many years, but now I think as we're going through this pandemic, companies are leveraging more independent talent, thinking more project-based. I'm curious if a lot of these institutions that are based in companies are going to move outside as we rethink what benefits and what personal finance looks like for workers.
Yeah, the security thing is a big one. As you mentioned, we've already, I don't know, are we 10, 15, 20 years out of you being a company man or company woman and staying with one company for your entire career? I mean, I can't even imagine who that applies to anymore. There's probably 3 places who still have pensions as a benefit. So the flexible work has really become a thing, and now is it's time to really shine. But there's also a lot of uncertainty happening right now, and a lot of threats to stability, even that you might have stitched together as a flexible worker. So it is a tough time for these folks. At least, folks like us, Caroline, we work for a bigger company, so we are able to work from home. It's hard for everyone to figure this out, but we have more of a cushion there to feel like we have colleagues to rely on and processes to fall back into. If you're a freelancer or a contractor, you might not have that same sense of connection and community. And that, I mean, just outside the business point of view for a moment, that's a big part of surviving and even thriving, if anyone can do that right now, through this whole crisis. So that kind of work, I think this is a real proving ground. I think we're seeing that it does work, but we're also highlighting some of the pitfalls of it in more extreme ways than we would have if we hadn't had this opportunity to have this particular conversation.
Right, and we're here talking about LinkedIn's new Workforce Confidence Index, which came out this morning. I was running through some of the main findings at the top of the show, but we may have been having some technical issues. So if you're just joining us, this is LinkedIn's Workforce Confidence Index. It's a bi-weekly look at how the workforce is feeling on the ground right now. We took a look at different industries. How are different industries feeling? Of course, red is bad, green is good, as with most graphics. But as you can see, some of these more heavy hit industries by layoffs right now: entertainment, media, design, consumer goods, retail, real estate. These are less confident about their career prospects as well as their personal finances right now. We're seeing more confidence when we look at legal, manufacturing, finance, healthcare. Healthcare right now is booming, as we know from the LinkedIn Workforce Report. There's been a 35% uptick in job listings for the healthcare industry overall this month. And so we're seeing that reflection in the survey right now. Another interesting finding from the survey was really the generational differences in how people are thinking about their careers right now. Millennials are actually the most confident. And the reason for that has to do a lot with where they are in their careers right now. If you think about the average millennial, they've had enough time in their career to get to a certain place of job security, but they also have enough time in their career to make up for any losses that they might feel from the coronavirus pandemic. We talk about millennials. I've seen some coverage in the Atlantic that says that millennials are shaky right now, but we're at least seeing through our survey that they're pretty confident with where they stand.
Yeah, I think it's that time in your career where there seem to be more options in front of you. The road can fork off in many different directions. When you get a little bit further in your career, maybe you've become more of an expert in your field. Maybe you've found your passion and you really want to stick with it. And times like this can bring some uncertainty to that because you're not quite sure what the road's going to look like afterwards. Is it going to be a single path? When you're earlier in your career, it can fork off in all those different directions. And a lot of times when there's constraint or there's stress, that's when some of the most creative ideas happen. Anytime there's a big recession, there's a big upheaval in the market, you see so many interesting startups come out of that then years later become these juggernaut businesses. And I think if you're younger in your career, maybe you can hold on to that hope a little bit more that you might get caught up in that wave or even start that wave. As you progress in your career, it's still certainly available, but I think the fear starts to creep in a little bit that maybe it's not going to quite work out this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all the insights from the survey around millennials are interesting. And the other insight that I found to be particularly enlightening was how pessimistic senior leaders are right now, who, as I said earlier in the show, are really on the front lines of the business and what the business is looking like right now. They're the ones in the spreadsheets figuring out what's going on with their P&Ls, what's going on with their projections and targets. If you couple this with another finding of the survey, so this is showing us that executives are less optimistic in the near term than, say, an independent worker who's lower down in the food chain. But if you couple this with another finding of the survey was only 6% of the people that we surveyed told us that their companies are lowering their targets for projections of what the revenue is going to be moving forward for this year. So there's a lot of not confident CEOs who are saying you still have to hit your sales targets, which I thought was interesting from a perspective of how is this going to look like for the business community moving forward.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that number too. And we're going to be doing this survey every 2 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to looking at that number in the coming weeks. I wonder, is it that many companies who've made that decision? No, we are not adjusting things. Or is it that many companies who are still in the process of figuring out what they are doing generally and just haven't gotten around to the hard numbers like that yet? It does seem a little out of step to me that such a low number of people would be doing that. And my guess is that it's just there's so much other chaos going on that maybe they haven't looked that hard at the bottom line yet. I mean, for us, we're about 6 weeks work from home. Some other companies aren't quite that far down the road. So I'm curious to see how that number moves as we keep measuring the sentiment.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we are going to follow as we follow all this. I'm seeing some notes from my producer. We're going to try and get Jody in here one more time. She says that she can hear me now. So hopefully there's some miracle happening in Los Angeles where the connection is working and we can have a conversation. Jody, hello.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear, but I could see it was a good conversation.
This is just the new world order. I'm just rolling with it. Broadcast for a digital audience. All right, Jody,
Yes.
you shared a little bit, but what I wanted to move the conversation forward for you is how is work going to look like for independent consultants once we come out of this pandemic? Is it going to be better for them? Are more companies going to adopt that type of talent? Tell me what you're thinking.
Yes, I think it actually in the long run is going to be a lot better. I think obviously remote work will feel much more comfortable for people, and that will open up the world of independent consulting across geographies in a way that we saw a little bit of before this, but I think we're going to see it a lot more. I also think, as I said, BTG lived through the recession. And we saw that once things started to stabilize, but before the confidence level was really back to a robust growth economy that we've lived through the last 10 years, independent talent really was a godsend for companies. They wanted to bring people in. They wanted people mostly to start working on innovation and growth because those are areas that tend to be shortchanged during a tight economic cycle. And so I think you're going to see enormous comfort and usage of the independent talent community once things stabilize. And also 10 years ago, when we went through the recession, 12 years ago, this was a very new concept. Now it's more widely known. Companies understand that these resources are available in a way they didn't 12 years ago. And I think that's also going to contribute to a real moment of, I think, acceptance of this kind of labor usage that, up until pretty recently has still felt a little unusual.
Mm-hmm. But in the short term, we're seeing through this survey that freelancers are pretty unconfident about their prospects. What is your message to them right now in terms of how they should be thinking about their career?
I think that they're in the same bucket as everybody. I mean, I think there's a lot of general uncertainty around how long this is going to last, how deep this is going to go. I think they have the ability to use this time to improve their skills, just like, education is typically countercyclical. And so the ability to learn that new skill and get certified. We work with General Assembly. There are a lot of great ways that you can get upskilled in the world. I think it will be hard for everybody for a period of time until people understand how long this is going to last and how deep it's going to go. So I'm grateful that the government has recognized independent contractors and actually allow them to apply for the PPP loans, the payroll protection program. And I think that's, a very important acknowledgement of their role in the economy. But I think like everybody, this is going to be an uncertain period.
Mm-hmm. And before I let you go, you've been a longtime advocate for flexible work. Are you seeing on your side that some of the misconceptions around working flexibly, leaders are changing their tune as we're all doing it?
I think everyone's going to look at their lives, those of us who spend, a third of our life on a plane, for example, and feel like we can be effective without that intense travel is going to ripple through everybody. Offices, travel, the way we engage will all, I think, change. Probably not as extreme as we're experiencing today, but a different mix, a different blend. And, there are studies that have shown for many years that productivity between teams who are with each other all the time and productivity between teams who have met and know one another, but largely work remotely, are statistically the same. So I think when people see that productivity can be maintained and that there's some advantages to this, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of openness to this way of working.
Right. Well, Jody, as the wife of a consultant, I really hope that you're right. And as always, it is a pleasure to speak with you. I'm sorry about the tech glitches, but we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Caroline.
That was Jody Miller, the CEO of Business Talent Group, talking to us about LinkedIn's new Workforce Confidence Index that we're coming out with every other week. Headline for me there is we're seeing from the index that freelancers are shaky right now with their career prospects, but as Jody and I were just discussing, hopefully coming out of the pandemic, we're going to see more big companies leveraging independent talent. Sorry for the tech glitches. Thank you for rolling with us and sticking with us on the show. We actually have another show coming out later today. My colleague Jesse Hempel is going to be sitting down with Backstage Capital's Arlen Hamilton at 3 p.m. Eastern right here on the LinkedIn editors page. It'll be a wide-ranging conversation about the future of tech, what's going on in her industry, and Arlen has a new book coming out. So please join us back here at 3 Eastern. I'm Caroline Fairchild. This is Business Unusual. We'll see you tomorrow.